Hey everyone, promising news update today. It looks like MindMed today announces the first patient dosed in phase 2B of their MM-120 trial for generalized anxiety disorder. So the first patient dosed under phase 2B of their trial. So let's take a look here. So let's click on this and then we'll do some more analysis and more digging in to understand what this actually means. So if you're looking at this, on YouTube, then you could also follow along with my screen. If you're just listening, I'll be talking a lot, so you'll get the gist of it generally. So again, headline press release right on their website. MindMed announces first patient dosed in phase 2B trial of MM-120 in generalized anxiety disorder. MindMed, a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company developing novel products to treat brain health disorders, today announced first patient dosing in its phase 2B dose optimization trial of MM-120, a pharmaceutically optimized form of lysergic acid dithylamide LSD for the treatment of generalized anxiety disorder. The initiation of our phase 2B clinical trial, the largest well-controlled clinical trial of LSD ever conducted, represents a major milestone for MindMed and for the many patients suffering from generalized anxiety disorder, said Robert Barrow, Chief Executive Officer and Director of MindMed. This exciting next step is the advancement of LSD builds on the positive top-line data presented by our partners at the University Hospital Basel. So they're partnered with Uni Hospital Basel in Switzerland in May 2022, which demonstrated the rapid, durable, and statistically significant effects of LSD and its potential to safely mitigate symptoms of anxiety and depression. The results of our phase 2B trial will guide the dose selection and development strategy for our pivotal phase 3 clinical trials as we continue our efforts to bring a new potential treatment to the millions of people living with generalized anxiety disorder. So this is it. This is right before the phase 3 trial. What it looks like they're doing here. Friends and listeners and investors, and again, this is not financial advice, only infotainment. But what it does look like they're doing here is they're trying to narrow down the dosage. So they're trying to, in a very robust, statistically sound, probabilistically sound, clinical way, the kind of way that the FDA will approve of and allow and like. In that way, they're trying to figure out what dose do we want to use in phase 3. In phase 3, the all important, the major, serious phase 3 trial. What dose do we want to use? Okay. Let's look into this more. So if you're on the website here, if you're looking at the website as I am, let's jump to investors. Actually, no, I think they have it here. It's better. There's an investor deck that we could look at, but let's just go right directly to programs and research. So we can see their programs and research. MM-120 is there. So I want to see where they are with their pipelines. Let's take a look. There we go. Clinical and digital trials. So clinical trials. No, it looks like the investor deck is going to be probably the best for us. So the investor deck lists out the actual trials and what stages they're at. Okay, so they're in August of this year. They recently, just the summer, they recently created a new investor deck. So we got the investor deck here. Let's scroll down to the trials. So here they are. So again, this is within their investor deck, available at their investor relations site. So it looks like the first one, as you can see here, is MM-120, right? This first one here, everyone. And they're saying it's for generalized anxiety. So it looks like in the investor deck, it is accurate. They have the 2B listed, and then they're going to start phase 3. So what they're doing now is they're basically they're doing a very important thing in finding the correct dose to try in phase 3. We can keep reading here. The phase 2B trial in patients diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder is a multi-center, parallel, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled dose optimization study, like it said above. The trial plans to enroll 200 participants. So the first one at 200 got their dose. Okay. Let's see if it talks about the dose. Okay, who will receive a single administration of up to 200 micrograms of either a placebo or 200 micrograms of their substance MM-120, which is basically LSD. So 200 micrograms. So this is where this is where if somebody's investing, like for me personally, I'm comfortable investing in this space, right? But if you want somebody to invest for you in this space, or you want somebody to research this space for you, you have to have an understanding of the actual drugs themselves. You can't invest in this space prudently, in a true prudent way, I believe, if you don't have some either personal or like a third person through talking to friends or family or other people about what these drugs mean to them, what these medicines mean to them, what kind of effects these medicines have. So a lot of people take LSD, in North America, and they take it incredibly seriously. They have an incredibly deep and important bond with that drug, and they think that it's an incredibly important experience, as you already know if you know anything about psychedelics. But 200 is interesting. It's not in the starter dose here. It's a more serious dose. So they're going right to 200. A lot of people, when they first do LSD, they start with 100 micrograms. So 200 is a pretty interesting study here. So the primary objective is that's what they're thinking now is the appropriate dose. Maybe if they'll have a little bit too many negative reactions, or not enough, kind of mystical experience, not enough people having a really profound experience, maybe they'll tailor the dose up or down. So the primary objective, I'm continuing reading here, everyone. The primary objective is to determine the reduction in anxiety symptoms 4 weeks after a single administration of this drug. So of course, the anxiety symptoms will be reduced immediately after. Probably, if you have a good trip, you're going to feel less anxiety in the days following. But um, I would say, depending on how well you're able to translate the lessons and the kind of the mystical experience you have on LSD into your daily life, that'll kind of be one potential determinant of how robust your anxiety is going to be decreased in 4 weeks, in 8 weeks, in 16 weeks over time. So if you treat it just as a fun time and then you go back to your daily life, it won't have a big impact. If you have this as part of an overall self improvement program, where you're overall using it to improve your life, like a warrior, like many people have taken this drug, like many people continue to take this drug, like many people write about, then it's a different approach. If you take it just for fun, if you just take it for fun, it won't do it. But in this case, I don't think people are taking it for fun. It looks like they're taking it to actually, get rid of their anxiety, and they're seemingly being brave if they're going to take LSD, uh, especially if they haven't taken it in the past. Now, I don't know if they have taken it in the past or not, but so the primary objective is to determine in 4 weeks you have anxiety reduction. Key secondary objectives. So the primary objective is to see what happens in 4 weeks. Key secondary objectives measured up to 12 weeks after the single admin of the LSD include assessments of safety and tolerability, as well as quality of life. Interesting. Then they go down and talk about anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting trial. Let's take a look at the FDA trials phases. Let's take a look and see what they have on that. So let's go right to the FDA website, fda.gov, the drug development process here. If you're following my screen, then you can kind of see what I'm doing. If you're not, then what I'm doing is I'm at the FDA website, and they have just a brief overview of the FDA process, the kind of the gold standard globally for getting drugs approved. That's how we get drugs approved in the U.S. So the first step is discovery and development, where research for a new drug begins in the lab. Step two is preclinical research. Drugs undergo laboratory and animal testing to answer basic questions about safety. That's what's happening now. So this is a 2B version of that. Let's see if they break it down to different 2A, 2B. It looks like they're not breaking it down here on this site. But once they're good with the 2B, I mean, clearly once they're good with the 2B and they get the dose down that they want to use in step 3, they're going to go to their main clinical research. This is a big one. This is actual clinical research. They're tested on people, and they're making sure they're safe and effective. This is the data and the kind of the info and all the considerations here from step three. That's what will be used in the FDA kind of review, which is step four. Um, and then step five is post-market safety monitoring. So there has been the case that FDA approves drugs in the past. FDA has approved drugs in the past where they've later had to go back and take them off. So FDA it's not God. It's not some magical thing that only approves safe things and never approves unsafe things. There are things that are approved that are often, taken out. Obviously, people that believe psychedelic drugs, psychedelic substances are true medicines and therapies, they're sitting here and thinking, dude, FDA is approving a bunch of negative, like crazy shit. They've approved ridiculous, like drugs in the past that shouldn't have been approved, including like fat loss things that just very negative, had very negative consequences. Yeah, throughout the last even 5-6 decades. I've read anecdotal, like I've read stories, anecdotal, like one-offs of like weird drugs that were approved and then were later, had to be tossed out and no longer could be remain approved. But people who are into psychedelics, you'd generally come across them balking or like being cynical towards the whole process, because if you've taken psychedelics in the past, you may you may think, oh, what does the FDA know? Like, you think you know more than the FDA, or you think that like they should have approved it 30, 40, 50 years ago, and that there's very little negative consequences from these drugs. I get all that, but I'd like to caution. I'd like to add a little bit of caution into the mix, because remember, there's a self-selection bias in the world for people who have tried psychedelics versus people in the world who will try psychedelics over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. In 20, 30, 40 years, people are going to try psychedelics who would never, ever have tried psychedelics had they not been approved by the FDA. If psychedelics remain illegal, if they remain like taboo, this group of people, they're not going to try it. They're just going to stay on SSRIs. They're just going to stay on what they're doing now. That's sad for them. That's what'll happen. They're conservative. They're not prone to like experimenting, and these people may have negative consequences if they take psychedelics. It's possible that in 10 or 20 years, once psychedelic therapies are well known and kind of replacing the previous suite of medicines for mental health problems in the U.S., it's possible that some people trying these drugs will have negative effects, and it's incredibly useful, incredibly important that we have therapies surrounding the actual taking of the substance, therapies with trained therapists, MD, psychiatrists, capable of actually guiding and advising you in the moment. You know after having knowledge, after having maybe experienced the drugs themselves, or having and or facilitating other trips, so they have a good, robust, mature understanding of how to guide a person. And two, the ability to do drug intervention, something I don't think should be done often, but in the worst of trips, in the worst of situations where a trip is clearly going bad, potentially drug intervention may be useful. Now, some people are of the mind that there is no bad trip and that even a very dark and terrible trip can teach you something, but I don't agree with that. I think that there are some people that are just not ready for a trip, or that are not going to be capable of having a trip at all. Period. That their mind is already on the spectrum of kind of the mind, where you have like a normal mind in the middle, and then you go to one side, more OCD, and then as you go all the way to the side, you have somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Aviator, somebody like that, right? Somebody like that on one spectrum, where LSD and psilocybin would just benefit them so incredibly on that side. Then you move towards normal, and then you move towards psychotic. When you're moving towards psychotic, the farther you move, you don't need LSD. You're already like on LSD. You're already on psilocybin. You're already in touch with these other mystical realms. So you don't necessarily need that. And in fact, it could take you farther out, and it could kind of ruin you in this life, in this existence, in this monkey form. It can kind of not do well for you. So prudence is important. Risk management is important overall. And information is important, especially if we're going to take a big civilizational leap, moving past these dark, nasty meds that are being taken in North America now for mental health, and to a more holistic, more appropriate, more mature, more wise approach. We do want people to know how these things impact all kinds of people. We want them to um, we want them to know how these drugs impact all kinds of people, all kinds of races, all kinds of ages, all kinds of economic backgrounds, all kind of mental states, everything. We want to know all of the stuff because we want to make sure that whenever we're sitting with somebody, whenever somebody's sitting down and tripping out, um, there's a set of reliable knowledge, right? This isn't a game. You're not in college. This is a big thing that's happening in the world where we're going to have large publicly traded companies providing psychedelic therapies. It has to be done correctly, right? It has to be done correctly in every way, and everything matters. Everything matters. So um, that's just a bit of a tangent here. So let's get back to the main part. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, if you're listening, still thank you. Please please like the content and subscribe. I'm and I'm really open to feedback. I really want to know what I should cover, what I should talk about. I have so many ideas for content. So stick around here. This is going to be a beautiful thing. What I'm going to make this channel, and I hope you're finding it useful. So yeah, engage with me here. I'm very excited to engage with you. So yeah, that's that. This is the news. Let's back off this tangent a little bit and jump back to the main news. So this is good. This is some cool news for MindMed. Um, Another brick again on the big, beautiful wall that's building that is going to separate us from the dark past and prevent us from going back there for a long time, hopefully.